I'm here with Joe Cassavaugh, founder of Puzzles by Joe. Joe's had some tremendous results in the casual PC games market and reached 3 million in sales with his Clutter series. He's worked for some big players in the past, such as iWin, before starting himself in 2009. He undertakes all of the development himself, has low costs, and continues to make a significant amount of money every year, actually $200,000 in profit and growing year on year. We're going to dig into the casual PC games market and talk about what it takes to run a successful indie game operation as a solo dev in this environment. Joe, welcome to the business of indie games.
Hi, Simon. Thanks.
I'm delighted to have you here, and we'll jump straight in. Please tell us how did you first get into the casual PC games market?
Well, that's a real long story, but I'll quick. In way back in '93, I wanted to get into games, and it took me a while. But long story short, I worked for a company called they were called World Play, and they were the old Sierra Online. They were actually the Imagination Network that AT&T had for a while, and in between Imagination Network, or as we became World Play, we were working on a thing called Cyberpark, and it was basically, I don't know if people know this, but back in '95, people were paying long distance charges plus $7 an hour plus long distance just to play checkers and chess and backgammon and stuff online. Mm-hmm. And the slogan of the company was come for the game, stay for the chat. And they really got what this was going to become pretty early. But anyways, I got lucky and we got bought out by AOL right before the Time Warner merger happened. And I was more of a tools guy working in games. And about a year or so, a couple years after we got bought out by AOL, I started working remotely. And then about a year after that, I quit because I had enough funny money from AOL to try to be independent for a while. And I wrote 8 or 9 really horrible little window games that were all logic-based, and nobody wanted to play them except for brainy people, and there weren't that many people coming to my website, and I might have made $200 in about a 3-year period. It was horrible. But I had funny money from AOL, and those 9 games led to the job at iWin. And iWin wanted me to port their Mahjong game, and we did much more than port it. And this was in 2004 and 5, right at the boom, right when the casual market was born, when people started realizing women wanted to play games if you gave them the right kind of games. And basically, I wrote the 3 Mahjong quests for iWin. And at the 4 years, 5 years later, we're pitching. We went from 13 people up to 120. We went to 3 guys making a couple of great games to Death by Committee. I pitched several things. Finally, they let me do my own game. But 6 months into they had half greenlit it. 6 months into the project, a couple other things bombed. The market got tighter, and they decided they weren't going to do any in-house games anymore. And this was in October of 2009. My wife and I were driving, believe it or not, over Hogback Mountain in Vermont, HOG Mountain. And that to me was just kind of funny because HOG, of course, is hidden object games. But she turned to me and said, "Do you think you could do this game on your own?" And the game was called Diamonds at the time. And it was a murder mystery thing, light adventure. And I said, "No, I can't quite do that." She's a big fan of HGTV, Home Shopping Network. She started talking. She wanted to do a game with, set in a beautiful house. And all the hidden objects were going to be that. And I started thinking about, just picking up laundry, believe it or not. 2 socks on the back of a couch. You just pick them up and you clean the house. And that quickly became well, let's get rid of let's get rid of the names in a hidden object game. Let's make a non-verbal hidden object game that's randomly generated and replayable over and over again. And Clutter was born. So she actually turned to me and said, can you do diamonds on your own? And I said, no, but I can do something similar. And I immediately went back at the end of October, cut a deal with iWin that I would stay till Christmas. If they allowed me to use the tool set after I left, I would help them get out Jewel Quest 4 at the time. And that's what I did. And I signed a thing that they had 2 years of right of first refusal. And I went off and took a year to do the first Clutter game.
Oh, that's great. And when you were at iWin, did you learn a lot there then about like the marketing and the sort of creation of these games? Or were you instrumental in developing that strategy?
Yes, I learned, in fact, so when I look back on my career, I tell people that I don't believe I've ever been hired for a job I was qualified for at the time I was hired. And that was true of iWin. I'd written, 9 little window games that got their attention. A guy I worked with back at the company that got bought out by AOL was the creator. He ended up being the creator of Jewel Quest. He was from Sierra way back in the day. He did their card games way back in the day. But he had the head of iWin look at my site, and they immediately basically offered me a job, and I was still working remotely. They were in California. I was in upstate New York. And I had never worked on a large asset pipeline. I'd never really used C++ for more than just a little better C. I'd never worked in a framework, all this stuff. But I took it and dove in and had a blast. And I did 3 Mahjong games for them. There was a guy by the name of David Fox who I think he does a company now called Double Coconut. He's also an indie. He opened my eyes to what bigger development, could be, and how to do a full game, a game with at least some sort of story, cutscenes, etc., plus the puzzles. But all I really cared about was the puzzle end of things. But anyway, so I learned a ton, enough that, yeah, I felt I could do it on my own. That, you learn the good stuff and the bad stuff, right? The death by committee really killed me. I remember at the end of Mahjong Quest, the first one, where people were everybody's getting on everybody's case, and we had too many cooks in the kitchen. And in hindsight, I realize now my superpower is getting stuff done, getting things finished. But when you're with a big committee and you have people that think they're the art director and this and that, they all want to, I call it make your game blue, make that a little bluer. They all need to put their little stamp on the game and make it perfect. But in our market, in the casual market especially, perfection is not required. You want no defects, but perfection is ridiculous. And most, I have a friend that uses an expression, a difference that is no difference at all. And basically, anyways, I got fast or fast enough. And it was more, what the big thing I got from it is I knew that when I went on my own, that Big Fish and iWin would both take my game, and I would get at least 100,000 eyeballs. And I knew if I got 100,000 eyeballs, if I wrote a game, good enough, that I'd make anywhere between 10 grand if it sucked, and over 100 grand I thought was very doable. The market proved me wrong, by the way, and I came in right at about 50,000 for my man-year effort, which wasn't good. And I almost quit. I almost did not make Clutter 2. But anyways, I hope that answered most of your questions.
Oh yeah, I'm really glad that you did make Clutter 2, and because it's so wonderful to have a success story, with with our audience, this is exactly what they need to hear. So you said you knew you could get the 100,000 eyeballs.
Yeah.
Is that because while you were there, you were also watching the business side of things and to see how that worked?
Yeah. I mean, towards the end, they even allowed me to, look at the financials and stuff. And even at the end in 2009, my Mahjong Quest games were paying for my salary easily, continually. And this is they've been out for a couple of years, and they're still bringing in, each one was bringing in 6,000 to 8,000 a month. And this is, to me, I thought it was ridiculous. But anyways, I knew that for Big Fish, all you had to do was make a game that was 4 to 6 hours of gameplay, played full screen, had some things, right? And again, I'm going to use the framework that I wrote Mahjong Quest with. So, getting a game out quickly or getting out a game that's all mine was no big deal. I knew because of how much the games made, and back in the day, by the way, in 2005, I mean, we were happy with a 3% conversion rate. We were ecstatic. But of course, a lot of things happen that affect that. I'm not saying my Clutter game's better than my Mahjong games. A game has its time, it has its place, etc. Clutter, even without a marketing push, did well enough that I decided I could make the sequel in half the time. And even though 50,000, so the first one made 50,000 in about 15 months. And if I never did a second Clutter game, that first game might have made eventually 60,000 for me. But instead, what happened is I decided to do the second game because I do the second game in about a 6-month period. I took a second job here, sort of hedging my bets. I worked for a local gambling company. So it took me a little over a man year. But when I put out that second game, and the other thing is I was pretty sure that second game would do as well as the first game. The nice thing about not having a huge hit is you're pretty sure you can duplicate it. If it's just a moderate hit, then you figure, moderate success, you can figure you duplicate it. And sure enough, that's what I did. But then it did something that I didn't really expect. It bumped a lot of sales to that first game. And that's the difference between the digital market and like the box stores. People can still find your first game. So that second game went out the chute and made that first big chunk just about the same as that first game did. But it also bumped additional sales. So within, I think, 6 or 7 months of that second game going out, it had generated 70,000 more income. And that was, 40,000 of its own plus 30 more that I never would have seen go into that first game. And that's when I really said, well, I'm doing 3. I totally scaled back my other job. And the third one just really took off because Big Fish actually gave it a little bit of a push. And then after that, it's just better and better. And each game, the conversion rate seems to go up. And that's because my fans are truly there. I truly have a strong fan base. I'm a little biased because the fans I know are only the ones that are really fanatical about my game. But there's a bunch of them. And there are some people that play one or more of my Clutter games every day and have for over 5 or 6 years now, and they play it for over an hour a day.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And what's the size of that fan base now, roughly?
Well, again, that's tough to measure. On my own website, just a couple thousand have come, right? I have a Facebook page that's also got 1,000 people, but most of those are probably from the website too. In fact, actually, my web page is probably a little higher than the 1,000. And so they buy it directly from me. So, for example, last Christmas I released Clutter Clutter 1000 the day before Christmas. And I have a mailing list now it's only about 1,200 people, 12 to 1,400 people, whatever. But I sent it out, and within 3 weeks, 300 people had come and bought the game directly from me. And I have my best year prior to this past 6 or 7 months was, I think, 4,500 from my website. And I don't really promote a lot yet. I'm getting to that, but I don't yet. But anyways, I've sold $5,000 worth of product in just the first 4 or 5 months of launching directly. And then it's all the trickles. I have about 10 or 12 distributors now. It's ridiculous. And each one surprises me at times. And again, this last game did really well. It's 4 months later. It's still on the front page of Game Fools. Game House, I'm going to go exclusive with them for at least a month on the next game. Big Fish is okay. The lack of promotion up front actually meant that the chunk was smaller, but it's longer, it's fatter. It's because one of the things I've learned over time with the franchise, with all that is a missed sale today is just a future sale tomorrow. I used to worry about that, how big that first chunk was, but it's that long tail. It almost doesn't matter that first chunk anymore. I mean, It's nice, but it doesn't matter. If the spike's high, that means the next month's going to drop even lower. But if it doesn't look like it was a great first month, that second month's going to be higher than it was, and it really is. So, and I know I rambled. I'm not even sure I answered your question, but
no, it's really actually very interesting. It was a few things there. So, like, you haven't really started the sort of promotion yourself, so you're relying on your distributors to do the promotion for you.
Correct, because there's a couple things. It's a time constraint, right? If I spend time getting out the games, I know I'm going to make $200K a year from now on for at least the next 2 or 3. If I spend too much time trying to do my own self-promotion experiments, etc., it's all little time sinks. I'm getting faster. I just went to Unity. This last game was written in Unity. The current one's written in Unity, and I find I am faster. So it looks like I'm going to be able to get out 2 games a year pretty easily, which is also I'm also going to have some bandwidth to do some more experiments. And that's actually, I'm gearing up to do that now. Come back and check with me in 6 months and I'll find out whether I can really print money, because that's what I'm hoping. Hoping I can just dump money into Facebook advertising and see a profit.
Yeah, wow. I look forward to that.
Yeah. So I sell the games at my website. They sell for $10 and I get to keep 9 of it. So.
Yeah, and that's the big difference, because I mean, the game I'm making at the moment, we'll sell it for $29.99. Then it will be a race to the bottom, but I'll net out an average of $5.68.
Wow. Yeah. So my average, it's a little bit. I mean, I start at 7, and I average down at 2.5. It's still a race to the bottom, but it's not nearly. I'm already closer to the bottom to begin with.
Yeah, but your tail is longer, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, so for instance, the kicker to that story is if I'd never done Clutter 2, that first game really might have made me $60K. It's made $250K now.
Yeah, you've refreshed the franchise, right?
Yep. Every time it goes out, it's another, and that's the game they get, they'll go from the current one back to the first one and then move forward sometimes. Sometimes they jump around. About 70% of the people that make it to my website that buy a game buy more than one of my games.
Yeah, understood. And I mean, can you even take it to the nth degree where you would reskin the same game, but for like a different, for a season, say the Christmas version would be Clutter 1, but reskinned for Christmas,
Well, I have some ideas of reskinning, okay? but I don't. Each one of my 9 games is actually very, very different. Now, I do things in my games, I call them blasts from the past, where I'll resurface a variation they haven't seen for a while. But each one of my games, I try to make it new and different and special and whatever, because I don't want to ever have that complaint, right? I mean,
yeah,
I do. I mean, I am in it for, making money, but at the same time, it's art on some level, and I try to give them value. In fact, maybe even ridiculous amount of value. This last game had 1,000 puzzles replayable, and they're all, all replayable. There's people, some of my customers, that will go through all of them because that's what they do. But there's other customers that tell me, oh yeah, they played it for a while, but they go back to 2 because 2 is the one they love for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great approach, because once you've got money, then I mean, the only real motivation, and also otherwise we wouldn't keep doing it if we didn't love to make games and it is art on some level, and even if it's a $2.50 game, it's still art. I know casual games don't get taken as seriously as the AAA, or the AA, right. And it's also very painful there. Like, my sort of level of perfectionism has been beaten into me by, 17 art directors from Electronic Arts, So I think it's more art on some levels when you're on your own, because you get to have your creative expression, right?
Oh, more than that. Whenever I think of an idea in my head, the first thing that happens is, oh, Jim or CJ would hate that. I think about, right, somebody else that would hate that. I go, well, I'm doing it. CJ once said to me, nobody's gonna buy just a collection of puzzles. And I opened up one of my games with that quote, and CJ, I mean, CJ's really great. CJ's the CEO of iWin, and he's a great guy. He didn't believe in my vision, but I don't know, impressed isn't the right word, but he's come around. He's amazed on some level of what Clutter has pulled off. And he's been, he's given me a couple contacts that have led to some trickles that definitely kept me in business and got me to the next level. And, it's been an amazing ride that way. It's just, I'm a math geek, right? And they kid me that I have OCD. I don't believe I really have OCD, but I do love math and numbers. And I can show you my spreadsheet that has every dime I've made from every source.
Oh,
and
that's
I can
awesome.
show you the long tail per distributors. I can show you all the distributors. I can show you, hey, when that trickle dried up, here's another one that opened up. It's been amazing. And one of the coolest things that I've noticed is how differently the distributors treat me now that I've stuck around for so long. And that's been fun. I famously made I won't call it enemies, with both Gamehouse and Wild Tangent back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Gamehouse wouldn't take my first game, thought it was ugly, and I basically got snotty in an email, then apologized them in person. I think they finally took game 2, and then they wouldn't take game 1. They took 2, 3, 4, 5, and they finally took game 1. And now Gamehouse has turned all around, and there's people come and gone there that, I'm going to go exclusive with them, in a bit. Wild Tangent kept saying no. I went on LinkedIn and got the people that's saying no, their boss, and started doing an end run around him. And he finally sent me an email one day that said, Joe, although I admire your tenacity, you're this close to us never wanting to hear from you again. and I met that guy a year later, which was really funny. I actually met him out and about. But Wild Tangent is another place that Clutter 5, I think, was on their front page for a good 5 or 6 months. You know,
Yeah.
and go ahead.
I know. I remember they've been around a while. Wild Tangent now.
Oh yeah, they've been there for ages. And Gamehouse used to be Real Arcade. You know, that's who they were back in the day. And they all had different levels of hits of their own little niche. I think Real Arcade had Ricochet, if you remember that game, and/or Zumba.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Whatever it was called, it was the big ball one. Because when I was working for iWin, we used to watch all the different players and stuff. And the market has just been amazing. I mean, 2005 to 2008, it was just huge. And then, I don't know, 2007, I think, was when Big Fish sort of captured the market with the hidden object games. Mystery Case Files came around, and people started treating them like movies. They had the price war, if you remember that, where prior to that, all the games were $20 games. And they had a price war that brought them all down to 10, and then Gamehouse created basically the hidden object game, the modern hidden object game, and raised the price back up to 20 just for them, and called them deluxe and so forth. And it's I don't know, it's amazing. But by the way, the bigger people, it seems to me the bigger a company is, the more myopic. I'm not sure if that's the word. Okay, so I'm going to get in my mini rant. I'm going to digress here. One of the big things I think that separates really successful people from less successful people is people that understand the difference between luck and skill. And people that get big too quickly usually end up thinking it's more skill than luck, and they discount things like being in the right place at the right time, etc. And there's an arrogance that comes with that. And it's like pride goes before a fall, But I find the bigger companies are the ones that just they just don't want to think outside the box at all. They think their way, it's their way or the highway. And I'd much rather deal with the smaller companies,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And I love Big Fish. And I way back, I had 2 games on Big Fish. I didn't mention this, but before iWin, and in between making 9 games for my Windows PC that nobody wanted, I made 2 little games that went on Big Fish. And back in the day, and this is before the boom, you'd go out and you'd sit at number 1 for just a day. This is when they first were coming out with a new game every day. And they did a nice thing where no matter how bad your game was, it usually went on a bundled CD, and it made some money that way because you were on with some really good games. And I made 2 games that made like $3,000 for them, for me, through them. They were horrible little games too, but they were nice. And at the time, they were small. Their bread and butter came from a game called, I don't know if you remember, Moraf's Mahjong.
No,
way back, but they were one of the first big Mahjong sites. And Paul was a really nice guy, and he sent me this 2-page thing of how to get a game basically on their site, which it was basically his definition of what a modern, what a PC download game had to be. It had to be 4 hours long. It had to be running full screen as well as Windows. Had to do some things. And he was a really, really nice guy. And then Big Fish basically came in just as the boom. They got huge. iWin was a little smaller, but then they won the price war. They created Mystery, and they became huge. And every step of the way, they've done some really nice stuff. And they've sold, I think they've been sold out, twice now. But I'll give you a great quote from Paul Thielen that most people don't know. So Paul, who was the originator and owner of Big Fish, sometime between the market booming and them doing the Big Fish slots thing, he said, and I quote, "It's such a hard business. Even when you win, they change the rules." And that's the nature of the game business, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
constantly changing the rules on you. And what worked 5 years ago will not work again.
I think Big Fish are showing some leadership in that area nowadays.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he's even with their, they're now owned by the Australian company, the Aristocrats or whatever. And they were owned by Churchill Downs for a little while in between that. And they're one of the few companies making a successful, that actually has already made the successful transition from, casual PC downloads to the mobile market.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about the mobile market in a minute.
Sure.
There are a couple of things that popped up for me, like you've got your distribution channels. First of all, you clearly you have an engine now, and you've ported that to Unity, and that allows you now to make 2 games a year. Is that because you have, all the menu systems are already sorted out?
For sure, and
puzzle mechanics.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And it took me a while. I mean, it took me a while to just even go to Unity. That's a story for another time, but I had to find the right person. I ended up finally doing some pair programming with somebody that really got me over the hurdle. And you asked what I learned from the other, my other experience, and I came from a framework model. And most developers don't even understand. If you talk to most game devs and you go, okay, so explain to me the difference between libraries, a framework, and an IDE. And what's the strengths of each, and what do you really want to work in, and do you really think of them differently when you're doing them? And they might understand. They understand libraries. They understand what an IDE is because that's but they don't really get what a framework is. So what I did, I didn't port it. There was no porting for sure, but I definitely ported the idea of it. No code got ported because so to tell you. So the framework for my win was a dirty rec cast member system, where you actually, and it was a nightmare whenever you had cast members pointing to other cast members and deleting things, not good.
Is it like the old Macromedia director structure?
Yeah, which I never did. But anyways, it was a dirty rec system, and there's no way you're going to port, that kind of a thing. But the framework. And here's the difference between a framework and a library is a framework is something you fit into. You need to understand the framework well enough and then conform to its rules so things work well and you don't go against the grain. So in Unity, yes, in the old framework, I'd already built up a system that has, yes, a main menu. You have X number of games you can get to, mini games, and you swap between them. You also had a quest where you pop in between, but you're still in a quest mode. And this is how it's been since Mahjong, the first Mahjong game, etc., and from the first Clutter game. So I didn't feel any need to change that. So I wanted to write a piece. Oh, and in my old system, every game subclass from minigame, and minigame's the guy that really talks to the framework. Anyways, I wanted something simple in Unity, and the framework is what handles things like pause, dialogue pop-ups, your buttons, all that stuff. Well, a lot of that in Unity you do differently, but you still want some common elements all over the place. So that's what I did. I actually have a toolbar. I took a game jam, believe it or not, a couple of years ago, and instead of doing a new mini game, I decided I really hadn't handled my mini game switch problem yet. And I was still working under the old system, but I knew I was going to try to go to Unity, so I was doing my game jams in Unity. And I was getting a little more sophisticated. And like I said, I think it was my 3rd mini game I was about to do when I realized, a lot of this, I want it to be shared. If I do it, I'm going to have to pull it out later. It's going to be extra work. And I took a whole game jam and wrote basically what you would call my framework. So I have a toolbar that sits up on top of all my mini games, and that toolbar has next puzzle, previous puzzle, jump to main menu, pause, scoring, all that. And that is a prefab. That is one single prefab. and there is a subclass mini game that all my games talk to, and it does all the magic. So if you hit pause, you get everything for free. You get actually an N by M number of puzzles for any mini game, and you jumping around puzzles and all the way that works, and even reading your config files and everything, all that, it just works. So when I create a new mini game, I just think of the little thing I need to do that is just that game. So that's done now. Wow. I wasn't quick until that was done.
Yeah.
And now that's done, and that's why 2 games a year is actually feasible.
Yeah, fabulous. Oh, it sounds like,
because there's still quite a bit of new code. As you know, it's nice to talk about, oh, I can reuse the engine, but you still always give them new variations and new, you always push.
Yeah, and there's always another optimization to make. Right?
Well, there's that too. I love Unity. One of the nice things is I'm out of the optimization sort of business, right? I don't get to the low level stuff hardly at all anymore, and I keep it simple. I'm no expert in Unity, but I'm sort of an expert in 2D Unity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Just the stuff I need to know. So.
Thank you. So to get back to the business side of things, sure. I can talk. I'm interested in the technical stuff all day long, but the focus here is you've got all of these distribution channels that you now sell through and promote and you track. Do you have, what kind of conversations do you have? What negotiations, what tricks or tactics do you have to make sure that you get promoted, to make sure that you get on the front page of the shop, etc.?
You don't. It really is, suck it up. It's you can ask, and asking is definitely better than not asking.
Yeah.
But like I said, on bigger ones, one of my big frustrations with big fish is I know I'm never talking to the guy that I should be talking to. I'm always one removed. I have to convince the guy to then go and fight against make a case for the guy who's making the real decision. I want to talk to the real decision guy. On a lot of sites, I am talking to the guy. My trick over the years is how do you be a squeaky wheel and get the grease without pissing them off so that they just don't want to deal with you. And it's always a fine line. The Wild Tangent story, to finish it up, how I got on Wild Tangent is after he sent that email. When I met him, I got the rest of the story that, a few weeks later they let me on. He said, oh yeah, they used to come into me, twice a week and go, he's writing us again. And the VP went, well, what's he saying in his email? He says, well, he shows us his numbers from Big Fish, this and that, and so forth. And he goes, well, how are the numbers? So they're pretty good. And the VP was like, then why don't you let his game on your site? And that's how they finally. Clutter does not appeal to producer art director types. That first game, in fact, is really kind of ugly. But the fans love it. The people, it's sort of a love-hate game. In fact, I argue that if you're making a game that most people see it, they go, that's pretty good. You haven't made a very good game. You want people to love-hate your game. And unfortunately, or the negative, I've created a game that most producer artist types look at it and do not understand why anybody likes it. And that's tough to get marketing promotion from those people because of that. Now, I actually put out a game that had a more standard story that was still Clutter that the producer types seemed to like, but my customers base liked it less because it wasn't, quote, Joe-centric enough. Yeah. Because they're used to the Joe-ness of it, some of them even got mad because they felt I farmed out the art and story, which I farmed out the art, but I didn't I was definitely involved in the story, even though I didn't write it.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing. So it's tough. It's begging, right? The best you can do is, how do you beg convincingly? They have the power, right? The best you can do is make your case that they're going to make money too, which is, even with big fish, I do that. I constantly will say, you've already made $1 million too from me. It seems like you should push to the next level and say, you're treating this game wrong because you're just looking at it as one game, when you really should look at how the bump is going to make you even more money. And that bump works for you as well as it works for me. So all you can do is make that kind of a case. And there's the old expression, right? I'd rather seek forgiveness than ask permission. Well, that's sort of how I am in emails. There's a thing, what do they call it? It's the revert. It's a shit sandwich, right? It's how you give it: nice, horrible, nice, right? So I try to do that when I'm complaining, and I will often apologize for my own complaining in the next email. And I often at least elicit some empathy there. And it's not a game. It's me. I usually thank them, which is honest and true, for allowing me to vent. That it's not personal, aimed at them, it's aimed at the system. And then I usually get some of that. And I believe, even though I might be deluding myself, that maybe occasionally that makes that guy go fight harder, or they decide to give me the banner, or, you know what I mean? It
makes sense.
It's such a tough call to know whether that's a good strategy. I don't think you can ever know. So when you can never know, you might as well do what makes you feel better that you can't prove is hurting you. How about that?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
and it's a tough business, right? I mean, you believe
really.
Every game you create, you believe, it's the next game that's, better than sliced bread or whatever. And
just needs the promotion.
Yeah.
And you've got to be yourself as well. And
right. And the 23% I push to, that's why I still push that to everybody now,
we haven't spoken about that on camera, but you used to get 3% conversion rate, and now you get a 23% conversion rate.
Yeah, so I said 3% was back when Jewel Quest and Mahjong Quest went out the door, back in 2004-2005. The first Clutter game actually got 5% on Big Fish. The next game got a 10%. Then it was 13, 14, 15, and so forth. And now this last game is 23. Now there's a couple things that it caused that. It's not the game so much getting better, it's the franchise effect, right? Some of their fans have gone away, but the ones that have gone away from Big Fish are not the hidden object game people, right? And there's a lot of people that already go, hey, that's a Clutter game, I'm getting it immediately. So there's my fan base that, naturally ups that. The nicer things to point to are things like when I hear from people that go, I don't know why I was putting off trying your game for years, and they kick themselves they kick themselves because they go, I'm so mad at myself that I didn't try this 2 years ago. I love it when I get one of those that tries one of the later games and goes, but the reason they didn't try those earlier games were just too ugly for them. They turned them off.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of Clutter, right?
Yeah, well, even so, this last game, I have a theory of why it did so well everywhere else. In this last game, I merged Clutter with Mahjongness. So even the layouts are now prettier, can be. And I used some of those pictures that showed that it was ordered Clutter, so to speak. And I did a lot more than I have in the past with object groups. And one of the big things I did was I found 100 smileys, emojis, that were great. And I do believe it was Clutter, but it's all smiley faces and no rotation. So they're all face up and they're in a Mahjong layout, but it's Clutter. I think that one picture to me explains it got people to try out my game that never tried it out before.
Right. Wow.
It proved what?
Wow. It's extraordinary what one image can do like that.
Yeah, and it proved me wrong, because for years I've been going, all that cares is the mechanic, right? That the marketing, that I get the marketing, but it's what happens once they're in the game. And I do think I do that well, by the way. I get them playing the game almost immediately, maybe one click on the main menu, maybe not. And they don't have to slow down till they've, played a couple levels, and they immediately know how big the game is. My best game ever had a little plane that went across that said 0 out of 600. And within 30 minutes of getting to the buy decision, they know they haven't even seen 1/20th of the game. And if they're on the fence, I figure they got to go, I still haven't seen everything yet, Yeah. And as long as they don't hate too much, because occasionally I do a level and people go, oh man, I hated that level. But my fans all know there's always another one. If you don't like something, you're going to like the next thing. And that's what my games, I think, provide more than most games.
And do you take that into account in the design? Like I often put, my favorite levels or the best levels that come out of feedback testing, I put them up front.
I do, but there's very little feedback testing. I've already made those decisions ahead of time.
That's the Joe-centricness.
Correct. But the buy decision, it's definitely, I think immediately. In fact, I want to time it. I try to time the level. I want my best level to be the level that most people will see right before the buy decision. So, I mean, you have to give them the one that's introductory, but even that one, the nice thing is Clutter really is this. And people are cloning me now. People are even using Clutter in the title. I've created, Big Fish considers it its own subgenre of the hidden object game, because they have it as a category itself on their desktop when it pops you up and says, hey, you might like this category. And that's kind of cool. And it's not like I created Clutter, but taking the one variation and doing it to death, and variations with the variations, is what Clutter's all about. Is that they don't know what they're going to get for that next puzzle, which I think more than most games has a much bigger aha than most other games. Most other games you're learning and you go to the next one, you go to the next one, you go to the next one. In Clutter, every level's different. And I got lucky. There's a thing called sliders, which is my variation of a shredder puzzle. And I wrote an interface when I was at iWin just to prove how bad their interface was, because most people did these shredder puzzles by, you would click on a shredder piece, it would pop up, and then you click on something else and it swaps. And I do this thing where you can just play it on the phone. But even without putting your brain on, you can do these slider puzzles until they get harder. And people seem to really love those. And it's a really nice palate cleanser breather between the clutter. And I use it to tell the story. I use it, it's a nice mix. And that I don't think's ever coming out of the Clutter game. Anyway, so I give a lot of thought about that. Yes, that first half hour. Even this last game. So I used to have a logo, Puzzles by Joe, then the game, and a Clutter title card or Clutter something. And one of the things I tell the game devs around here is any animation you're doing for opening setup and all that, no matter how much you love it, speed it up. Speed it up by 2 to 3 factors, because if you love it, you got to remember that people might love it the first time they see it, but the 20th time they see it, they do not want to see it. Okay?
Yeah.
So anyways, I have Puzzles by Joe that's just there, the splash screen, just like I have to do a Big Fish splash scene why I win. But 2 games ago, I got thinking that one of the things I want to push is that Puzzles by Joe is that I do more than just, even though the Clutter 9, they sort of know there's more than one Clutter game. My logos now are actually have a screenshot of the menus of each of the other games on it. So that right off when they hit it, they realize they're seeing a game that's the 9th game in a series instead of the first, right? And that to me also has a great little, mental effect, I think, on people, right?
Yeah.
So, and then my best game ever was the very first. It was a cave metaphor, which I think helped. It had really, really jaunty up music for the main menu. It had a handwritten note by me for the first puzzle, for the first slider game, 3 puzzles in, that basically said, I'm a one-person thing. If you got a problem with the game, tell me, that this is a personal kind of game. And the very first thing that happens in the game, they get a pop-up text that says that they have to find the gold cave to start their quest. And there's 3 caves there. And in each cave, there's 3 sub-caves, 3 or 4 sub-caves. But I really believe that little aha experience where they go find the right cave and find it, which only takes 5 seconds, is immediately this little positive reinforcement of this aha. They figured something out, and they're already in a good mood, ready to play the game. And that's the only game that had that in it. And it performed well enough that I looked for, why did that do better even within the franchise effect? Why was that game more special than the others? Because, by the way, I constantly reevaluate. I go, every clutter's the same. Oh, no, everything, and every time I think I believe something, I'm proven wrong. Like this last game, I'm now really, really worried about which screenshots I want to show people.
Yeah. Because you've tried that, and then...
Because I didn't think it mattered, and then all of a sudden something happened that made me think it mattered much more than I've ever given it credit for.
God, Joe, it sounds like you work a lot. How many hours do you work?
Actually, I don't. Okay, I work a good 40-hour week, 40 to 50 hours a week. I think a lot. I also read a lot. I do, tons of stuff. I do all their game dev related stuff. But the actual working, I wish I sat and cranked out code more often. This is considered work, but this to me is just, fun. And
for me too, absolutely.
I have a slide. I gave a talk a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, called "If I Could Turn Back Time," and the point of the talk was, what advice would I give myself if I was just getting out of college today? Okay?
Yes, yeah. I was going to ask you actually, if there's what would you do differently?
Well, that talk ends with a slide that says the best the best game I ever played was called "The Business of Making Money with Original IP," and the score is in dollars. Yeah. And it's not in how many people love your game, how many people think it's beautiful, etc. And it's true. I've had a lot of fun, realizing that the business is more important, is just as creative. How about that? Just as creative as actually programming. And I love programming. I'm one of these people that believes I will program until I die.
Yeah, and why not?
I have friends that went into management, and I never understood how they could give up, coding. It's so. Anyways, no, 40. I don't work. I think about it a lot, but I don't think I'm a hard worker. I wish I was. I think that 200K could be 300K if I was a hard worker.
Yeah, understood. So. And it's more, the environment becomes increasingly challenging, with more releases, people like Big Fish changing the goalposts. What advice would you give to young indies or even old indies starting out, wanting to build their own franchise from scratch? What advice would you give?
So I don't know. So I couldn't do Clutter again today because it wouldn't make me enough to keep going. Now I say that, but at the same time, I'm fast enough in Unity that maybe, maybe I could do it. For the past 3 or 4 years, I've been preaching that it's an overlooked spot, but it's now shrunk enough that I'm not sure it's viable. The thing that seems to be viable, and it definitely was more viable 2 or 3 years ago too, but hyper casual is really big in mobile, right? And the people, if you look at the people that are succeeding without the huge hits, it's people like mobility wear that they advertise their own games within it. They create these games that really only want you to play it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they move you on to the next game. And while they're doing that, they also still have their perennials like the solitaires, the mahjong, the free cell, etc. Right? And I think that's still doable. That I think if I was a young kid starting over, so the biggest advice is this: do something that's randomly generated. Don't do. It's too hard. It's too much of a. If you're hard coding your games, levels, you're in trouble, because unless you get super, super lucky and win the lottery, you're in trouble. Whereas if you do it randomly generated the way I did, you can at least keep building on that, and you can give much more value, for the buck. I have many things that I'm still thinking about down the road to lessen my dependence on the distributors. I want to do more direct sales. I want to do a monthly magazine. I want to get to the point where you talked about Christmas. Yeah, I want to go, hey, here's a pack that can go with any of the last 3 Clutter games, and you can play with Christmas elements. Something that just replaces it, which is not the full, the full game. One of the things, in addition to loving the business end of things, I'm a hacker, okay? But I'm a hacker aware of good software engineering techniques. Okay, let's put it that way. I'm not great at implementing them, but I constantly think about how I can refactor and get better at what I do. And that's getting better at all aspects of the business. Dealing with my distributors, self-promotion, like even this, right? There's things I want to do every month because I know eventually they might pay off, right? And then there's just getting more efficient even with my day. Things like, should I check my email first thing in the morning, or shouldn't I? Or should I be doing that once a day and just, you do it and you get it out of the way? What's better? I have a thing on my laptop, you'd laugh now. I have a thing called Joe's Brain.
Joe's Brain, brilliant.
Yeah, it's from a company that I didn't want to pay money for it. And once I figured out I could do most of what they did. And by the way, I use AOL Mail because AOL, I got funny money from way back, so I still keep my AOL Mail account. And their tool, although would work with Outlook and some other, wouldn't work with my AOL Mail, so it didn't convince me. But their system of basically where you make a directory structure that is your brain was great. But I realized I could do it in my folders. And just recently, I got more serious about that for actually 2 reasons. I hate wasting time finding something that I want to share with somebody. And I hate worrying about backups in more than one place, kind of a thing, right? So now that I have Joe's Brain, that's the only thing that gets backed up that's not my dev environment. And it really does have every piece, if we're talking and I go, hey, I've got an optical illusion I want to share, I can find it. I don't have to search. I don't have to hunt. And I do that with everything. And I enjoy it, right? So, and that's the trick, is I want to take my product to the next level where I can let people play Clutter. And I'll give you this. So about 4 years ago, I think it was after Clutter 3, I realized I was the steward of Clutter. I guess that's the correct word, the caretaker. And that changed the way right? Up until then, I was just getting the next game out. Then I realized I had enough fans that, man, I'm just going to disappoint them if I don't put out another Clutter. They're truly, I have fans that within a month of the last game going out, they go, love the game, Joe, love the game. When's your next one coming out? And I take that seriously because I recognize the luck of what I've achieved. And I have gratitude for my fans and for being allowed to be the clutter guy. And by the way, 2 clutters ago, Clutter 7, Clutter Infinity it was called. It was called Clutter Infinity, Joe's Ultimate Quest. It was clutter number 7. It told the story. Over the clutter games, it's got more and more meta and more Joe parts of it, okay? Well, Clutter 7, Clutter Infinity, I gave him 60 puzzles in the main quest because I was just turning 60. And every puzzle had a little snippet of my life of how I became the clutter guy. It started with a story about my bad left eye and my 3 jock brothers. And I made the case that if I didn't have a bad left eye, that I would have been a jock like my brothers and there wouldn't have been a clutter game. And basically the entire game, the story end of it, was snippets of my life of how I became the guy that ended up creating their favorite game.
Wow, that's really clever.
And people loved it, and I had fun with it, right? I mean, that's part of, you'll know this, right? I talked about the business. I talked about the software engineering. There are times when it starts feeling like it might be a grind, right? And that's the nice entrepreneur out of the box, is you come up with ways to make that not become a grind. That's, I do only work the 40 hours, 40 to 50, but I do think about it a lot. And part of what I think about is, how can I have more fun while still guaranteeing, that $200K a year? Yeah. I have an agent now, by the way. I don't know if you know this.
Right. No, I didn't know.
Yeah, he's trying to pitch somebody figuring out how to do, that wants to do like a mobile free-to-play version of Clutter.
Yeah, I would
license.
You, have you tried it out on mobile at all?
I've tried it out on a touch screen on a pad, and it's great. Very little to change. On a phone, it would be different. But I don't want to be that guy to create the phone version of Clutter. I don't like free to play. There's so many things I don't like about what it might take to make that successful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it either. I mean, I can't see, apart from, the occasional random hit, how anybody makes any money. I mean, there are so many released every day, most of which aren't even opened.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
It's truly insane. But if he can talk into somebody and I just license it, fine. And he wanted a retainer, and I went, nope. I'll double your commission. I don't want you in the way of me getting my $200K, and I don't want you to make my life more painful, kind of a thing. So, I gave him feedback. They did the deck. I enjoy that part of it, but he's the one that's pitching and looking people in the eye. That's another thing I don't understand. I don't understand how anybody looks anybody in the eye in this business and asks for money. I don't.
Well, I'm your man.
I know. I don't know. So I've hated my whole life what I call the smoke and mirror people. Again, art directors that'll pitch a game and tell you how it's the best thing since sliced bread, and they'll give you a design doc that spends 3 pages telling you how gorgeous and how great this game's going to be. And I'm the mechanic guy. I want, show me how it's going to be fun and so forth, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. But, I mean, I've made 65 titles, and a number of those are 3D walkthroughs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It took me the hard road to learn how to make the fun first, and then the pretty graphics after.
Right. So, do we have a PG audience, or is it? Can I swear?
Oh, you're very welcome to swear. Yeah.
So I'm going to share you this snippet. I got so sick of hearing. Again, art directors or game design. In fact, there was this guy that was a game designer, art director, that was so bad as a game designer, I made up a title for him. I started referring to him as a game describer because that's what he really did. And he only had 2 pieces of feedback, which was wonky or not wonky enough, and would never explain, beyond that, right? But he's one of these people, it's really hard to find the fun in the game. This is when we're in death by committee, right? You got 3 people that have created 2 really huge hits in that casual market, and now you can't get any idea past them because it's, death by committee. And I used to tell the CEO, I used to tell CJ, if I had 3 guys, I might just go to them and say, what do you want to do next? That's what I might do. But anyways, they used to say, oh, it's really hard to find the fun, really hard to find the fun. And I got so sick of hearing that my answer finally became, okay, I agree with you. It's really hard to find the fun in a game. But you know what's not hard? Finding the not fun and staying the fuck away from it. Really. It's just, there's so many things I do like that, back in the day, if a player doesn't understand it, or the CEO or somebody's playing your game, they don't understand, back in the day, pop up a text, explain it to them. No, wrong answer. Never do that. By the way, I have it takes one keystroke to leave my game. And I've had, I think, somewhere between 5 and 10 customers over the years telling me how much they love that decision.
Yeah.
Because everybody else is, are you sure? Are you sure you want, or go back to main menu first and then leave it from the, are you sure you want, they're leaving your game. You might, check on, and I, loathe that. Have some respect for your customer, and it's nice to see decisions like that get noticed by, anybody.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyways, I'm rambling now.
Well, maybe this is a good point to wrap it up, but,
Sure.
Thank you so much for your time. I mean, it's been very insightful. I love the stuff about building a franchise, working with distributors, and the focus on, how you design your game and the customer care that you show, for your audience.
Yeah, they are definitely number one. I mean, that's the one thing that if I get an email, they get responded to, immediately. That's, to me, I never want to hear from a fan, that I treated them poorly. That just seems almost rude, right? Not even,
yeah.
That's such a common sense thing to me, right? That it's a gratefulness too, right? I mean, I don't know. It's just, it seems abhorrent to me to do anything but that, right?
Yeah. It sounds like you have a really enjoyable life, actually, making games and being with your fans. It's good fun.
It is, but it's just been an amazing ride. I mean, we didn't talk too much, but I do think a lot about what would I do if I had to start over again.
Yeah. That's a good question.
I would try to convince somebody to hire me, I think. That's what I tell the kid. So one of the things when I do talk, I tell the don't quit your day job. The market's so tough right now, you creating an indie hit is highly unlikely. So what you want to do is you want to get paid for improving your craft. Figure out how to do that. And so it's in my talk, I call it Don't Quit My Day Job. Later on, I talk about my love of mini games. What I really want to do is create new mini games. But I am chasing the cash cow that is Clutter, and I'm keeping that going. But what it is Clutter is my day job. Okay. Yeah. Clutter is, even though I do have fun with it, it's definitely my day job. The fun part is my non-day job, my indie stuff is still thinking about that next little mini game I want to create.
Yeah.
Can I do a puzzle magazine for my site that nobody's ever done before? Can I do what I call the Sudoku book model in mobile and prove everybody's got it wrong with the free-to-play crap? Can I talk about that for 2 seconds?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Okay. So the model I think people should do that are missing, because, again, I constantly think in terms of the customers and how I would want to be treated. Do you know how Sudoku became huge? You must. You're over in UK. You know the Sudoku story then?
Yeah, roughly, I think.
They gave it away to the papers for free.
That's right, yeah.
To sell the books. Okay? So I do everything with randomness and variations, right? Varying level of difficulties, varying within even the scope of a mini game, right? I have 5 things that look and feel differently, but they're sort of the same. Just like Sudoku has regular Sudoku, and then there's a Tetris version of Sudoku. There's a Ken version with, math in it, right? But they're all sort of Sudoku, right? So here's what you do. You create one of these mini games. and you give people, when they come up on it, they get a 5x5 grid with the variations and the level of difficulty. And you let them play anything they want and explore as much as they want. And you might walk them through 3 or 4, you know, a little quest at the beginning just to get them through 3 or 4 puzzles to teach them some stuff. But afterwards, you open it up. As soon as they're done, and this is all free, as soon as they're done 100 puzzles, you pop up your one choice. They can pay $1 for 100 more puzzles since they're all randomly generated, or they can pay $5 and never have to pay another thing again. And that's it. It's ethical. I don't want more than $5 out of me for a little game that, you know, does that when I compare it to what other things. I don't want whales. I don't want the Candy Crush whales. People addicted to my game and, you know, I'm bleeding them dry. Don't care. I want them to pay for the game, not a new skin that gives them a new face or a new hat or a new colored shirt, right? I want to create puzzles games. And that model, I think if you hit it right and at the right time, and you got any kind of press at all for being the new way to do free-to-play, you might start a revolution. I don't know. To me, again, I think the free-to-play model is broken. I think the 400 games a day out in the App Store is insane. Steam's insane. So you have to build something that, you know, is that. Now, I think that maybe with time, within a year or 2, I'll be able to run that experiment because I'll have enough bandwidth where I can take a couple of my mini games and put it over on the phone. And I have many that would play and, you know, have fun. Do I have enough customer base to start an initial push to at least survive there? Maybe. I'm going to be 62 this year.
Congratulations.
I'm retiring anyways. And when I retire, the only thing that happens is I flip a switch. And I care less about the $200K a year and more about, you know, making new mini games and playing. So
fabulous. Yeah, I look forward to that too, you know. Are your games expensive to make? Sorry, last question.
No. So it's only my time, my sweat. I spend at most $1,000 on art per game.
Oh, wow.
And I do a lot of the interface art myself.
Yeah.
But for instance, so lately what I do is anything that's a grind, I don't want to do anymore. So the last couple games have been collage based, and I have a local artist that I really, really like. The last game, I mapped out the story and what the non-story is going to be. Non-text, no text at all, but it still had a story and a point. And I loved what I did, and it had no instructions on nothing. It really ticked off a lot of my regular players. But it's the game that did better elsewhere. So the no text didn't seem to bother most people, okay? But it told a story based on pictures and collages. I liked the artist so much, I said, what would you do? What story do you want to tell? And she mapped out something that's sort of similar to what I did, but enough different that I went, okay, you go pick the pictures, you go do this, you make the, and she did that for me. But that for a game is still less than, $1,000.
Wow.
That's
great.
It's not where I spend the money. Music I get from, unfortunately, I'd love to do some local stuff, but can't quite justify it. So it's Partners in Rhyme. The one that I did the real story and art, the girl that wrote the story also did the music for that game that was much more electronic, more like chiptunes kind of stuff. That game ended up being a story. Basically, we decided to do an esports version of Clutter, which even though I knew the old lady, my customers are 40 and over, that we'd have to really explain esports to them, or they'd have to look it up if they really wanted to follow the story. And this is the one most people didn't like because it wasn't Joe-centric enough, right? But it was basically esports Clutter. So I even did a fake head-to-head Clutter in the game where your cursor's going in one color and another cursor's randomly moving, making matches against you. And it was tons of fun. But, and that is my guiding principle. Is it fun, and can I guarantee the minimum of what I want to make? So
thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah.
How can people reach you if they want to reach you?
Puzzles by Joe.
Puzzles by Joe.
Yep, full website. I'm there. You can put up my Joe Cassavaugh at AOL.com. You can share my email. I don't care.
Thank you. And the next game is out at the end of the month.
Yeah, or close. It'll be definitely beta by then for sure. And usually my beta lasts a couple of weeks because the nice thing about distribution is you don't put it on and it goes on tomorrow. So I can actually give it to them to start banging on while I'm doing beta, and then give them the final version when they're ready to put it on their website. So
great. Well, this is going to be fascinating for our audience. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, Joe.
Yeah, same here.
I've still got a whole bunch of questions, so hopefully we can come back and do another one in a few months.
Anytime,
Thank
really.
you so much.
And I wish you guys a lot of success in what you're doing. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll send you a link to our YouTube channel. You can see what we're up to. We're doing a fantasy Second World War game.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, 3D Unity thing. It's a lot of fun. Thank you, Joe.